How did you end up at SMU?
Uh,
Did they pay the most? Did they pay the most money back in the day?
well, actually, the Ron Meyer era brought in the SMU payroll. That happened in
a little before then.
Yeah, well, I was a little bit before then, but yeah, I got $10 a month for laundry.
That's when $10 is $10.
Yeah, we had $10 laundry money every month.
Now, you didn't start in high school until you were a senior. Did you not get along with the coach?
Well, every once in a while he'd whip my butt. He was my dad.
I know. I'm going, what? What'd you do to upset your father that he says, okay, I'm not starting until he's a senior?
Well, actually, it was very simple. I wasn't big enough or good enough, and by the time I was a senior, there wasn't anybody else there, so I got a starting position at 150 pounds.
But that was a bruising 6'2", 150 pounds, right?
Well, I was about 5'10" in those days, but I had a size 12 foot. My nickname in high school was, you ready for this? It was Skis. And there wasn't any snow. There wasn't any snow in Paris either.
I was going to say, not a whole lot of skiing going on in that part of Texas, I don't think.
No, none whatsoever.
So you played both ways in college, right?
What was that?
You played both ways in college. You played what? Defensive line, and you were wide receiver?
Well, my senior year, I was the left end, and we ran a straight T formation, no split receivers whatsoever, and we went both ways, played offense and defense. And I was the left defensive end, which in today's terminology would be an outside linebacker, because I was on the end of the line, but I played in a three-point stance and most of the time. So Forrest Gregg and I played side by side there for 2 years together, and but we went both offense and defense in those days. We didn't throw the ball any; we just ran the ball, and from a straight T formation, played good defense.
So did you enjoy defense or offense more?
Oh, I loved to play defense. I was a natural defensive player, and that was really, what I liked to do. I didn't know anything about, being a receiver because we never threw any, and so I didn't get introduced to the passing game until, I got into pro football with Baltimore.
Yeah, I see you only caught 33 passes in college. I mean, that's 2 games nowadays.
Well, I've caught 33 passes in 2 years. My junior year and senior year, between the two of them, I think that was right. No, we just didn't throw much at all. We ran the ball and played defense.
So when Baltimore drafts you, do they say, okay, we have ourselves a future Hall of Fame receiver, or any idea what their thinking was when they did draft you?
Well, I'll put it this way: if they thought I was a future Hall of Famer, they certainly did underpay me. I made $10,000 in my first 2 years. That was, and I was one of the higher paid guys.
They did wait till round 20, right? Back in the day when the NFL had, 20 plus rounds. Did you think you would be drafted?
Yeah, I was as a matter of fact, I was a 20th round draft pick. That was the year they drafted 30 players. So they took me on the 20th round after I finished my 4th year in college, which was, I was a junior college transfer, and so I actually went 5 years to college. And my junior year at SMU, that was my 4th year in college. I was eligible for the draft, so they drafted me in the 30th round.
When you got drafted, did they have basically plans for you to be their receiver or on defense, or basically it was just wherever they could find a spot for you?
No, they drafted me to play offense.
And so you get to training camp, and what's that experience like for you?
Well, it wasn't any fun whenever you're expecting to get cut anytime, and the only thing saved me, and actually it's the only reason why I ever got to play in the NFL, is I happened to arrive in Baltimore at the right time, at the right place, with the right people. I happened to arrive in Baltimore when they had no veteran receivers. I arrived in Baltimore whenever that team had only been in existence 1 year. They had no veteran group, and they had no real veteran receivers. And so my rookie year, there were 13 of us made the team out of a 33-man roster. And it was a perfect, I couldn't have made it anywhere else if I'd gone in the league. I wouldn't even have lasted. But they didn't have anybody, so I got to play. I got to be starter, and I played 12 games, and I ended up catching a tremendous number of passes. I caught 13 passes in 12 games. Are you good at math?
Won a game. I learned something from Sesame Street. I learned something from Sesame Street.
Well, good. I thought maybe you might catch that one, and so that was my production, and I didn't know my butt from first base about running pass routes, about getting away from man-to-man coverage, about I didn't know anything about the passing game and how to get open or anything. I did have a natural pair of hands, and I could catch, and I could run and jump, and at 185 pounds, that was my credentials. And so, but I did get at the right place because there wasn't any veteran players, and I got to play a lot. My rookie year, I started all year, and so I did start learning the game. And when I came back my second year, I was due to be replaced and due to get cut. They drafted 2 All-Americans to fill my position. So when I came to camp my second year, I knew I wasn't going to be around long.
How did you?
And then along comes this guy who was, I think, the previous season with the Pittsburgh Steelers and didn't make much of an impression. Guy by the name of Unitas.
Yeah, I forget his name. He was some free agent quarterback.
I remember he had a flat top haircut, and he wore high top football shoes, and you look at the guy, and you say to yourself, "Here's the most unathletic quarterback I've ever seen."
Well, that.
But he could pass.
Well, I tell you, if you would have saw both of us in training camp from 1956, you may have gone away sobbing. We
were a Colts fan.
we were 2 pitiful cases of football players. Good grief. And well, fortunately, we had a coach named Weeb Eubank that he saw something nobody else did. He saw something that we didn't know anything about, and I'm glad he did.
Well, you guys were more athletic than Art Donovan, or in better shape.
Well, Art Donovan is a totally different case. He couldn't do anything really but eat and play football, and but he could play football real good, and he certainly could eat. And but he couldn't run any, but he didn't have to. Playing defensive tackle, if he could just take 3 steps one way, one or the other, that's all he needed.
How soon did you know that Johnny Unitas was somebody special?
I don't think I really knew it. I sort of didn't know it that year. John made the team because he was a backup quarterback when we went into that second season. That was 1956. That was my second year. It was his second year. He'd been cut by the Steelers the year before. So, but he made the team as a free agent quarterback because we needed a backup to George Shaw. George Shaw had been a number 1 draft pick who played, the year, my rookie year, and I think he was rookie of the year in the NFL, and he was a really great athlete. he got a severe knee injury in mid-season that year, and Johnny Unitas was on the bench and came in to play. We were playing Chicago Bears up in Chicago, and George got this severe injury, and Unitas comes in and he threw a touchdown pass on his first completed pass. The touchdown went to the Chicago Bears, though. That was his first completed NFL pass.
Who intercepted it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Some defensive corner out there for Chicago that probably got a raise in salary in the all season, but
well,
he picked it up. He picked it off.
After that pass, he had to be better. Things had to get better after that.
Yeah. But that was his first completed NFL pass, and if you had been a close observer that day, you may have picked up on something that nobody, I don't think, really recognized, and that was John threw that interception. He's a free agent trying to hang on in the NFL, never gets to play, finally gets to play, throws a touchdown pass to the Bears on his first play. And then the rest of the game, he just goes about his business like nothing ever happened. And what you were getting an insight into was this guy's mental toughness and competitiveness and confidence. And he had it in spades, and that was a real tip-off because it didn't faze him a bit. He went about, had a very decent day that day, and the Chicago Bears ended up being world champions that year.
Now, the stories of you and Unitas practicing timing patterns and staying after practice are legendary. How long would you stay after practice and work on your game?
We'd stay up there 30, 40 minutes, and it happened quite accidentally, really, because my, as I said, when I came back from my second year, I was due to be replaced. They had drafted 2 All-Americans for my position when I came to camp, and it was just a matter of time before they were going to give me a bus ticket out. And so I had nothing in my life but football. That's what I was living for. It was the most important thing in my life, and I loved to play. And my world was getting ready to end, and Johnny Unitas came as a free agent. He'd already been cut the year before, and he loved to play football. He didn't ever have anything else on his mind but that. So we were 2 highly motivated players that loved to play, wanted to play, and didn't want to leave. And so, and Weeb Eubank, see, one of the things that I think someone like yourself needs to understand is that in this highly what's the right word? Highly organized day of modern football. I don't know how many coaches even allow time for players to work on their own after practice. Every place I ever coached after, I left the game as a player and started coaching, the head coaches, they get so carried away with what they're doing that they don't ever allow any time for a receiver and quarterback to go out there and work on their own. A lot of coaches don't even want them working on their own. They're afraid something be out of their control, so they don't encourage it and discourage it and actually just don't allow it. And Weeb Eubank was totally the opposite. He had learned under Paul Brown with the Cleveland Browns that Paul Brown always allowed his receiver and quarterbacks to spend as much time on the field on their own after practice as they wanted to. And Weeb saw the great results of that with those great Cleveland Brown passing games of the Paul Brown era. And so he encouraged it, allowed it, and gave us the time to do it. And we stayed out there as long as we wanted to. And we worked and got to know each other, and we, developed timing that you just can't get any other way. And what I later realized as I processed this matter was that there is a confidence factor involved in this something clicks in that quarterback's head. When he works with a receiver on that type of a basis for a long period of time, he gets to where he just knows that receiver. He knows when he's going to break. He knows those timing of his plays. He has great communication with him, and he has great confidence. And in the heat of a game, I think without question, a quarterback invariably will go to the receiver that he really knows is going to be where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to get there. And I think that's exactly what happened with Unitas. We just became like we worked. We were as one. We were a unit. And so, and I know in games, because he was given the responsibility of calling plays, we Eubank had no sense to recognize a instinctive play caller in Unitas. And he let John call the plays, and, you know, I wasn't old enough or mature enough to understand, but Unitas, no question about the fact, in the heat of games, a lot of times he'd call me on some play because he knew I was going to be there when I was supposed to be there, and he knew I was going to catch it.
Lenny Moore, we talked a couple months ago, and he gave you the ultimate compliment. He said, I became a great receiver because of Raymond Berry. Raymond told me, you're going to stay after practice and work with Johnny and me, and you're going to learn how to play wide receiver.
Well, that is exactly what happened. And Lenny, you know, that work after practice with Johnny Unitas ended up, the result was exactly the same as it was with me. I think that, you know, this type of after work, practice work was exactly one reason why we won 2 world championships in Baltimore. Because if you look at the nature of the games that we played against the New York Giant defense, which was a leading defense in the league, key play after key play came on plays that we had perfected, talked about, and worked on after practice till they were automatic. And in the heat of a game, you know, those things just came up and happened, and it wasn't any accidents. And but that after practice work and working with the quarterback, you know, and gaining that confidence of him was the whole key to it.
Don't tell Frank Gifford. He thinks that 58 championship was won because the ref gave a bad spot of the ball when he was running the ball.
Well, you know, I've heard Frank, you know, talk about that, and I think he really believes that. And I think that, you know, I looked at the film very closely, and I really disagree with him. I don't think the official missed the spot of the ball at all. I think Frank hit the ground and bounced, and I think Frank thought that where he bounced to was, you know, where it should have been put. But actually, when you hit the ground, that's it, and the bounce don't count after that.
Now, in that 1958 championship game, Colts against the Giants, as a player, could you feel that this was something special, or did you have to wait for a little time to go by to understand the importance of that contest and what it meant for the growth of the NFL?
I don't think any of us had a clue. I don't think we were old enough to understand at all. I don't think we had a clue. I think we were just thrilled to death that you know, we were able to win the game, and all the history and the significance of it. You know, now I'm not saying that that some people didn't understand it. I think there were some people that did, and I think that the man that really understood it, and this came out years later as I began to piece together a chain of events. I think the man that really understood the significance of that game immediately was Bert Bell, the commissioner of the league. And I saw him after the game. Now, I can't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but I saw him face to face very shortly after that game was over. And there was a memory of his face that just kind of got printed on my memory bank, and it was Burt Bell had tears in his eyes and he was crying. And, it just kind of registered, and I saw his face and then went on about my business. But that picture of him and that face and his tears in his eyes stayed with me. And years later, I began to put it together. Burt Bell understood that this league that he'd been nursing around for several years, doing everything he could to bring it to prominence, he knew that his baby just got born.
Who decided that the game was going to go into overtime and not end in a tie?
The rule book had been structured. Someone along the line had realized that in a championship game they had to have some policy for a tie game. And so the NFL, and I just use the word NFL, I don't know specifically the person or persons responsible for arriving at that particular rule, but it was in the rule book. And of course, nothing like that ever happens. Nobody even knew about it. And the head referee in that game was a veteran referee, and he knew the rule. Because I remember out there on the field when that game ended in a tie, we all thought that the game was over. And we went to our benches and thinking, oh, this is a tie game. We didn't know anything about overtime. Nobody ever talked about it. And that official came over to the bench and explained to Coach Eubank, the procedure. And that's whenever we realized, hey, we're going to keep playing. And I don't know that any of us really realized the significance of sudden death. All we knew was that we were going to keep playing. So we went out on the field when we got the ball and went about our business without really realizing the significance of what was happening. And I know that the Giants won that toss and got the ball. Our defense stopped them. They punted, and we were 80 yards out. And we had this awareness of the fact that there wasn't a time factor now. We weren't fighting the clock anymore. So, but we were 80 yards out, and it was a 17-17 game. Whatever it was. Anyway, 17-17. And so Unitas then comes in the huddle, and he just methodically starts mixing run and pass, and he moved the darn football 80 yards. And when we get in field goal range, a lot of people later on had this big question: why didn't you kick the field goal? Why didn't you kick the field goal? Well, I was out there on the field with Unitas, watching him being under his spell, I guess what you'd say, without even realizing it. Because Eubank had given John the authority and the free rein to call the game. And so in this particular situation, Unitas the last thing on his mind was getting a field goal. He's going to put that ball in the end zone. And he just mixed run and pass. Well, I think we went 13 different plays. I don't know, 5 or 6 passes, 7, 8 runs, something like that. And moved it, all the way in, and Amici went in, for the final 3 or 4 or 5 yards to score. And as soon as that happened, maybe the game was over. And we all turned and started running for the clubhouse. And that's and there wasn't any extra points because the official had explained first team scores wins. And so Amici puts it, he scores. The game's over. It's 23-17, I guess.
And on the final drive, you had a couple of receptions. You recall those plays?
Yeah. As I said, I didn't really realize at the time, but without question, this game was the greatest game that I ever played. It was, as I said, I wasn't doing things and we had a very basic, simple offense. We didn't really, I had about 4 or 5 pass plays. That was all we had. We weren't doing anything complicated. And this simplicity was the genius of Eubank. One of the things that I have found over the years. There's a little saying that's, as a matter of fact, I think my dad, as a Texas high school football coach, was exactly like Weeb Eubank. He made a decision about how many plays he was going with, and that was all he did. He didn't do much. And I know I played under him, and we just beat a bunch of teams because we could execute. And this is exactly what Weeb Eubank, that was his philosophy. He had just a very few plays, but we knew how to run them. And but one of the phrases that's developed in my head over the years is that I think it takes a genius to keep it simple.
Pat Summerall, who just passed away, mentioned that after that game, you guys basically had a pickup game in the park. So a lot of the players, were you part of that game?
Yeah, several years later. I don't know. Maybe it was. I'm trying to think how many years later it was. It was at least 5 years because I think I was. It may have been even longer than that because I think I was in coaching at the time, and heard about the reenactment of the game, and but I was still, as an assistant coach in our coaching years, I kept working out and running there for several years, and so whenever we got the word that they wanted to do this reenactment of this game in Central Park in New York, well, I was still able to run pretty darn good, and the Giants were a team that was 5 and 6 years older than we were, when we played them in '58. So this number of years later, whatever year it was, I forget when, all these players are getting 5 and 6 years older, is getting a bigger gap. So, but out there on the field that day, I could run darn near full speed, and and John and I just, we hadn't been on the field together in, 5, 6, 7 years, and we started running those routes. I mean, it was like we were, like there hadn't even been any break. We were just, I was, working out there, and during that little game, I came back in the huddle just like I used to when I was playing. I told him this is what I can get open on, and he'd call it, and we'd run it and complete it, So it was just kind of a replay of the earlier game, in a way. But I mean, it was very interesting to me as a coach that this big several years gap happens, and Johnny Unitas and I step on the field in this one afternoon, and he is putting the ball right on the money, just like we were when we were playing. And that was you just would never figure that could be the case.
You had a reputation for phenomenal hands. Is that something that's physical, mental, a combination of the two? How does it work?
Well, this is how it works. First of all, I think you're born with it. I think it's a physical gift at birth. I think it has something to do with heredity. For example, my dad, who was only 5'8" and probably weighed about 155 pounds, but he had big hands and big feet. And whenever I was born, I ended up being 6'2" and 185, and I got big hands and big feet. I got them from my dad. And from the very earliest time I started playing football, I could catch the football without even thinking. It was just a natural gift. And so when I got to the professional level and taking the fastballs at the speed with which Unitas was throwing, I found that I was dropping footballs that I should have been catching. So very early in my years with Unitas, I started really practicing catching like I'd never done before. And over a period of a couple of years, I really studied catching, all the different type of catches. And I ended up with a list of 12 different situations in the short ball, 6 different situations in the long ball. There's 18 different drills. And so, you got low ball, high ball behind you, too far left, too far right, etc. And so I just started drilling and I would catch 60, 70 balls a day. I'd go right down that list, catching 3 or 4 of each type. It was drill and repetition. Drill and repetition is the exact same thing you do whenever you take a typing course as a high school kid. You don't know anything about typing. Your hands have never done it, but they put you on a routine where you go through it every day, drill and repetition, and time the semester's over with, you know how to type. And you don't ever forget it. And I see the same parallel in catching. If you drill on catching the high one over your left shoulder, then more than likely in a game you'll catch the high one over your left shoulder.
When you went into
how does a guy with size 12 feet develop such good footwork?
Well, I think there's a couple of things really helped me on footwork. One is when I got to the high school level my senior year, then when I got in college, I ran track every year I was in college, 5 years. I worked with the sprinters, and whatever they did, I did. I think I developed speed and quickness during those years because it was just a lot of heavy speed work, and you do it over and over and over and over. You get faster, you get quicker. And then whenever at some point I developed these drills for footwork, and I'm trying to remember now when this first started, but I would backpedal fast, and then I'd be backpedaling, and then I would twist to my left and go 3 or 4 steps, crossing over. Then I'd twist to my right and crossing over. But I had a whole routine of quickness drills that I developed, and I did those on a regular basis, especially in the off season. I did them over and over, and there's no question my speed began to increase because I was still growing physically. You know, when I went into professional football, I don't think I really quit growing physically. You know, after 2 years, I probably finally leveled off. But in the first 2 or 3 years that I played, the off seasons were spent starting in February, March. I started working out, and I worked out February, March, April, May, June, July, and then went to training camp in July. And so I'm running and doing all these agility drills and quickness drills, and I couldn't find anybody to throw to me, so I had a hard time, working on catching. But the footwork, the quickness, the speed, and I just didn't realize, I was getting such a high level of conditioning and strength that I just hardly ever, I didn't get injured, and I went through most of my pro career without even getting hurt.
What was it like when you found out you were going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
Well, I was coaching, I believe I was at the University of Arkansas in 1973 when I got word about it, and it was my first year to be eligible, for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I wasn't surprised because, when I retired as a player, actually at the 6th, 7th year in the league, I broke the NFL record for receptions and then broke the record for yardage. And then when I retired, as a player, I held the record for the most passes caught in a career. I think most yardage gained for receiver in a career, and so whenever the year came up, I knew pretty well I was going to be put in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I wasn't really surprised.
What defensive back gave you the most trouble?
Say it again.
When you were playing, which defensive back was the toughest to go up against?
There were 5 or 6 of them over. I played 13 years, so I came up against some great ones. And I think, right off the top of my head and trying to do it in chronological order, Abe Woodson of the 49ers. And by the way, 2 of the 4 or 5 I'm going to name were 100-yard dash sprint champions in the Big Ten.
Woodson at Illinois.
Abe Woodson came out of Illinois, and he was I think he won the 100-yard dash in the Big Ten track, and he had tremendous speed. And so when he came to the 49ers, they put him over at the corner, and so I faced him, I don't know, at least 5 years in a row, twice a year. And he tried to cover me conventional for a while, like line up at 5 or 6 yards off, and that didn't work for him. So he really introduced the bump and run on me. And he walked up on me. The first time he did it, he walked up on me and just got right in front of me, like a yard off. And but he didn't understand that he was not keeping me from getting inside on him. So first time he did it, we just completed a bunch of passes inside. And the second game of that season, then he walked up there on me, and he got inside of me. He was going to cut me off from getting inside. And that gave me some puzzlement for, 2, 3, 4 quarters there. I couldn't figure out exactly what I could do because the guy could run. He was right up there on me. And I didn't know what to tell John I could do. I wasn't real sure what I could do. Eventually, what I began to realize is we had to beat him deep, and we had to beat him deep every time he walked up there, and that's what we started doing. I'd give him 3 or 4 moves in the first 5 yards, and then we timed a deep pass that I could catch it, fading away toward the boundary, and he had a hard time covering that one, but I couldn't get anything short on him, so we just had to go deep. Irv Cross was the next guy I think about. Now, Irv brought a whole different problem to me because that guy was big. Abe Woodson only weighed about 75 pounds maybe, and so when there was a collision, I would win the collision. With Irv Cross, he weighed about 195, and he was also won the 100-yard dash in the Big Ten. And he tried to cover me conventional first time or two I played, and I ate him alive. So he he walked up on me and started taking me on right over the line of scrimmage, and he gave me a fit trying to get away from him because, when he had a collision, I lost the collision, then I tried to outrun him, he won the race. So for a couple of games there, I had one heck of a time trying to figure out how in the world to get open on this guy. And so Dick Lynch of the New York Giants was another one that he was very smart, and he studied you, he knew that. But he also crowded you. He came up and he crowded you, and he'd take you on early, and you just couldn't run conventional patterns on him. But he knew what he was doing, and he could run, and he wasn't real big either. So when the collisions came, I didn't come away with anything worse than a tie, and sometimes I win the collision. Irv Cross, I couldn't win the collision, but those 3 right there, Jesse Woodman of the Green Bay Packers came along and with Lombardi's teams, and he was tough to get away from because he was another guy. He'd line up about 5 or 6 yards deep, but he'd only backpedal about a yard and he'd just squat. And so when you got down there, he was sitting there waiting on you, and he took away all your conventional stuff, and so it took me a while to figure out how to beat Jesse, and going deep on a guy like that was the other thing that he just had developed a deep ball, and John and I were pretty good at timing a deep ball, so we did have something against him. But those 4 guys were very, very challenging.
Did you enjoy coaching when you went into coaching, head coaching with the Patriots?
Well, I'll tell you the formula about enjoying coaching. It's a very simple formula. you get great. Are you ready?
Yes.
If you get great players, you enjoy coaching. And when I inherited the New England Patriots job, I don't know if you know the story or not, but I'd been out of coaching over 2 years. And I was living in Boston working. I had a friend there that had a business, and he hired me, and I was working for him. And so I was making a living outside of coaching. I wasn't even thinking about ever getting back in it again. I've been fired too many times. I was tired of it. And so the Patriots fired Ron Meyer right in the middle of the season. This was 1984. And so I get this phone call. Understand, I've been out of coaching now for two and a half years. I'm making a living. I'm perfectly happy. And I know enough about the coaching profession. No, I ain't missing it. And so Pat Sullivan gives me a call and says, I'd like to come over and talk to you. So he came over to the house and talked, and he said, we're going to fire Ron Meyer. And they had 6 games left on their schedule that year. And so he said, we're going to fire Ron Meyer. He said, I'm offering you the job. So I said, well, Pat, I'll call you in the morning. That was my decision about it. And I thought about it long and hard because, oh, you've been in the coaching business long enough. You know the drill. And I was, tired of getting fired and moved. And so I thought about it, and I thought, I think I need to do this. And so I gave him a call and said, okay, I'm coming over and coming to work. So I drove over there and walked in as the new head coach of the New England Patriots with 8 games left on their schedule. And I hadn't been in coaching for 2.5 years. I don't know anybody on the coaching staff. Maybe I think one guy I knew who he was. It was the Ron Meyer staff. I knew about 6 veteran players on the team. All the rest of them were new ones that had been brought in since I had been let go previous few years, whatever. So, and this is a Thursday when I'll go in there and go to work. They got a game against the Jets coming up on Sunday there in New England. That's how I got back in the coaching business. Is I didn't have anything to do with it, and I inherited. As I started looking at this football team and trying to get familiar with the players, everywhere I looked was talent and depth. And I thought to myself, good grief, this football team has got everything you need to make a run for a championship. Good grief, they got depth. They had 2 quarterbacks, Steve Grogan and Tony Eason, 2 of them. Both of them you could win with. And on a 16-game schedule in the NFL, you better have 2 because trying to get one of them through it healthy is a major accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And then we had 4 great wide receivers, 2 fine tight ends, and we had an offensive line that was as good as anybody could hope to get, and depth there. And then on defense, we had 4 great corners that could cover anybody man-to-man, 3 great safeties, and a slew of linebackers. And we had good defensive linemen. This team was loaded. I thought to myself, good grief, what have I inherited here? This team they can run with the horses. And so that's the team that I inherited with 8 games left. As I started learning and getting familiar with the personnel, I think during that 8-game stretch, I think we won 4 and lost 4 or something like that, if I remember right.
And then you make a Super Bowl in your second year.
Well, what we did in the off season, by the time the off season had arrived, I realized what we had, and I when the season ended, I told all the coaching staff, all of whom had been brought there by Ron Meyer. I told all of them. I said, now I'm going to hire my own coaching staff now. I said, any of you guys can apply for the job, and I will hire some of you. I said, but when it's all over and done with, you're going to be on my staff. And so it was about 2 or 3 of them, did apply, and I kept them. And then there was 2 or 3 of them that left. And the good part about it was, because I knew this team was ready to run, and if we could just keep it simple, because the biggest problem you got with taking over a new team is the learning process that a team's got to go through to learn the systems. And you just can't operate at full physical abilities whenever you're trying to learn, and you're in a learning mode. And the first year, a lot of times, is not productive because you just can't go on all cylinders. But the special teams coach, I kept him, so we didn't have to change the special teams system. The defensive coordinator was Rob Rust, and I kept him, and we didn't have to change our defensive system. Their offensive system was not good enough to win in the NFL, and I knew it after I took a look at it. So I hired a new offensive staff, and in the off season we installed the new offense. And so when training camp came, our big learning problem was offense, and it showed up in our early games. I think after 6 games or 8 games, we were about playing 500 football in the first half of the season. But then they began to get it, and then we got on a roll and won 8 or 9 in a row, I think, and to get to the Super Bowl. But when we went into the Super Bowl, we had a first-year offense, and it was A, B, C. And I'm not real sure it was even C, but it was A and B. It was that simple and that basic. But the theory was, and it wasn't just theory because I've been around long enough to know it, is that if you got great players, don't confuse them and let the physical abilities flow. And if you put too much on their minds, then it ain't going to work. So I knew I had great players, and I didn't want to screw them up. So we just went A and B, and it did us well all the way to the Super Bowl. Now, the problem with an A and B offense, when you come up against a PhD defense, you got a problem. And we couldn't score against the Chicago Bears. They had a defense. They've been putting it together for 5 years. And they had a defensive-minded coach over there named Buddy Ryan that was as good as it gets in the NFL. And they had a great defense with great personnel and a great defensive scheme, and our little A-B offense just was not up to handling the PhD defense, so we couldn't score and we got our butt beat.
People give Ditka credit for winning that Super Bowl. I think that was Buddy Ryan's team that won that Super Bowl.
Well, there's no question about the fact that the Buddy Ryan defense, I think all you do is look up the numbers. It really, and I've looked at the NFL since the 50s, and I would rank the Chicago Bear defense in 1985 in the top 4 or 5 that I've ever seen. I'd say that I'd rank the Pittsburgh Steelers defenses under Chuck Noll and their defensive coach up there, Bud Carson. I would rank that is the best defense I've ever seen, and I would put the Tom Landry's Dallas Cowboy defenses, they're in that ranking up there. And George Allen with the Washington Redskins was a defensive genius, and he was with the Chicago Bears when they won the World Championship, and then he went to head coach there. Playing against George Allen's defense was a full day's work. Those are 4 or 5 of the best. Buddy Ryan is as good as any of them.
I heard somewhere that the finalists for the Bears job in '82 were Mike Ditka and George Allen, and Halas was deciding between the two, and he was still mad at George Allen for leaving him in the '60s, and that's why he hired Ditka.
I don't really know the story about it at all. I know that playing George Allen's teams, whether he was with the Bears, the Rams, or the Redskins, you had your work cut out for you because they knew they were reading your mail all the time, and he was just an absolute defensive genius. And in no way, shape, or form otherwise. And Buddy Ryan, his defensive scheme was right there with him. And I said Tom Landry was in that group also, and Bud Carson, and Chuck Noll. And I had the dubious privilege of being to the places where I had to face all those guys. I was with Forrest Gregg and the Cleveland Browns for 2 years, and we had to play the Steelers twice a year. And I saw them up close and personal for 2 years, and good grief, they had personnel and a scheme that was just a great defense. And you speak about cornerbacks, Mel Blount. If you want to have a nightmare as a receiver, just go up against that guy all day.
Who do you think the best player to ever play in the NFL was?
Brown and Johnny Unitas. Those two. I think they're in a class by themselves.
The people that never saw Jim Brown, I don't think, have an appreciation for how outstanding he really was. I mean, he was larger than some of the linemen he was going up against.
He should have been outlawed. Oh gosh.
Oh, but you probably wouldn't have minded having him in the backfield if you're on his team. He was something.
He was so good that Hall of Fame players, their favorite plays are when they were able to tackle him. You talk to Sam Huff, he's got a picture when he was able to tackle Jim Brown. Bob Lilly.
I would have to argue with Sam on that. First thing I'd say to Sam was, Sam, did you doctor this picture?
That was before they had Photoshop. Of course, it had to be legitimate.
And the other guy is Bob Lilly. He's got a picture of him tackling him or chasing him down. But I think Brown tripped on that play.
That always helps you if he had just tripped, but I don't remember seeing him. We played him up there in Baltimore. It was 1959. We won the World Championship that year. And played Cleveland there in Baltimore. Jim Brown has scored 5 touchdowns. They beat us 35-28, I think.
I know one guy that didn't try to chase him down was not Gino Marchetti, Art Donovan.
That's you'll have to you can't believe anything Art says.
He still talks about that chicken eating contest with Gino Marchetti.
That one you can believe. If it had anything to do with eating, he won all those cases.